Sam Ani, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Mishka. Good to be here.
So, Sam, you are a gaming insight analyst at Sensor Tower, the author
Yes.
of State of the Mobile Gaming Report, my favorite report this year.
Uh,
Welcome, welcome,
don't
welcome,
make me blush. Thank
specifically
you.
because of that.
No, no,
And you're here to get a promotion, right?
that's
Just
correct. Yeah, that's the only reason. Please.
well, I hope it works out. So no, but really, I wanted to kind of have you on the podcast and dive deeper to the report. And some people, I think a lot of people have downloaded it, but not maybe all of them have truly analyzed because there's a lot of insights. And what I
Absolutely.
like about the way you bring the insights forward is you're very positive about the market. You filter, you look at the things that are growing rather than being the pessimist like myself who's like, oh my God, when are we going to see the next big hit? Why isn't the market growing as fast as it used to? So kudos for you for staying positive.
Thank you. Yeah, it's easier, I think, to stay positive in my position whenever I'm always looking at the Sensor Tower platform and I'm able to see what are the top 10. Oh, this game is doing well. This game is growing. Whenever you're constantly looking at these positive things, it's easier to stay an optimist. I don't discount anyone who's a little bit more negative than me, but yeah, I like to stay positive in general, I would say.
We'd need a specific Sam Ani filter on Sensor Tower that kind of brings the positive
Yeah, look how
so
great
that when you're
everything is.
feeling a little bit down, you just use the Sam filter and be like, oh, actually, things are growing. It's not as gloomy.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't look over there in that dark space. Just look over here. This
Yeah.
is this is where you want to see.
Exactly, exactly. Well, let's start looking at the bunch of questions that I have. So one of the thing is the basic one, like has gaming plateaued? Because the downloads have plateaued since 2020, and I can actually
Yeah.
show the graph. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, probably easier to look at the graphs, but if or just check it out on YouTube. But the first graph that I have here is mobile gaming plateau and what's next. So can you talk a little bit about this? And it's like, are we plateaued? Are we growing? What's the current phase?
Yeah, it does seem like we're plateaued a bit for sure on the download side. It's been, as you noted, kind of going down since 2020. However, I think it's important to note that 2020 was not a normal year. Of course, we had a huge growth, and then it's kind of natural to kind of revert to the mean from there, I would say. And if you kind of take a longer term zoom out approach, I think maybe it's arguable for sure that uh, we're seeing more of a long term kind of stable growth, at least in terms of in-app purchase revenue, which is if you look at the bottom parts of the screen. We've been seeing a little bit of growth in this past year, which is nice to uh, not have a little bit of decrease year over year, unfortunate in the
Mhm.
previous years, which is nice.
And
Yeah,
how do these trends look like when you start removing certain very mature markets like China, Japan, Korea, which are really big markets on their own? Like, what does the graph look like?
yeah, absolutely. So, unfortunately, in the past 4 quarters, we do still see a decline in downloads, about 5% if we discount those three markets for the past 4 quarters over the previous 4 quarters. But again, if you zoom out and you remove these more mature markets, I think it becomes a little bit more pronounced that yeah, maybe we're seeing a little bit more long term, kind of healthy curve.
Okay. And what's the comparison of downloads when you look at iOS versus Google downloads and revenue? Is it still so that Google drives most of the downloads and iOS drives most of the revenue?
That's absolutely how it looks. Yeah, there's a couple other key differences. I would say iOS leans a bit more Western, while Google Play leans more towards the Eastern and emerging markets. Uh, iOS is a bit more expensive, competitive compared to Google Play, but with a more valuable audience. And behavioral, I think iOS players tend to engage more with things like in-app purchase monetization, long-term progression mechanics, while Google Play players are more likely to engage with ad monetized content. So something like the hybrid casual games that we've seen a surgence of lately tend to see a lot of success on Google Play.
Mm. And what's the trend line there? Is it changing? Is it stable in terms of the revenue percentage iOS versus Google, as well as download percentage iOS versus Google?
Yeah, so we do see most of the downloads decline on Android, actually.
Hmm.
iOS devices are also down in the past 4 quarters over the previous 4 quarters. So sorry, I'm actually bringing some a little bit fresher
Yeah,
data
good.
the yeah, including the last quarter. Um, but yeah, the iOS down to devices are down 1% for downloads, but actually iPhones are up 2% in downloads for the past 4 quarters over the previous 4. So that's some slightly good news, hopefully, for
Mm,
people out there.
interesting. And on a high level, have you thought about, like, is there something you can see from the insights of developers and publishers rethinking user acquisition, rethinking monetization strategies, because we are looking at a very mature market.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of how developers are rethinking user acquisition and monetization strategies here, mobile gaming has always been competitive, but I think it's more important than ever to stand out. It's the smaller edges become more important. Getting creative, I think, becomes more of a necessity than a risk. If you're just copying other games, it's less of a winning strategy. I would say innovation is becoming more key. There's always a market for good games. There always will be, I would say. But more specifically, I have to preface with the idea that I'm not a super expert in user acquisition. I've never worked on a user acquisition team, but this is just kind of what I've seen in working here and talking with people. Maybe doubling down on creative testing and iteration to find those winning creatives is still more important than ever. There's a lot of interesting creative trends that I saw throughout the year. I think one overarching trend that I saw was focused on existing audiences. So things like IPs, although those are IP collaborations or
Mm-hmm.
the innate IPs to your game. Using things like celebrities or influencers. Celebrities in particular, I saw an interesting trend of games using kind of smaller celebrities, where it's a
Yeah,
celebrity that your audience might recognize from a certain show that's really popular with them, but
like
that might
Jake
not be the most.
Paul.
Yeah, yeah. That might be more on the influencer side of things. Uh, you got the idea that, like, being more targeted and cost effective. I think trying to lower those CPIs is definitely a priority, I think, for user acquisition teams at the moment.
Yeah, because
Uh,
the way I understand the CPI trend has been pointing upwards, and so it feels like a lot of the innovation is going on the marketing side. And the other part where we're seeing innovation is, of course, live ops. And let me show the live ops curve you have here is this one. So what we're seeing is that the time in games has actually increased. It's 8% more year over year that people are spending playing games, logging more sessions than ever before. Can you a little bit talk about what are the genres that are clear winners in terms of
Game devs. We know that great gameplay is what players love, but integrating metagame features like challenges, progression, rewards is crucial for retention and monetization. However, coding them is a tedious and time-consuming process. That's why top studios have turned to Hero. Hero provides a complete suite of battle-tested metagame features that are quick to implement, letting you spend more time on the core gameplay experience. Ready to ship fully featured, engaging games? Check out Hero today by clicking the link below.
yeah,
time spent?
yeah, absolutely. So some of the genres in terms of which genres are seeing the most growth in time spent. Strategy is definitely up there with games like, as I mentioned earlier, Last for Survival, Whiteout Survival. Sorry, they're both survival games,
Yeah,
and of course Brawl Stars had a massive year in 2024 as well. Also, I think shooters, interestingly, saw a lot of
interesting.
growth. Yeah, it's I think it's a little bit surprising, but actually, shooters, people are spending a lot of time playing shooters. Also, simulation games and puzzle games saw a lot of growth this year as well in terms of time spent.
And are there certain genres that have been losing engagement?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think sports is one that's been kind of down. I
Hmm.
think this is what Sensor Tower we call a product model more than a genre, but hyper casual. I think people are gravitating more towards polished experiences in terms of engagement.
Hmm.
And in genre, actually, geolocation was saw some decline this year as well. So games like Pokemon Go and
Game,
others.
basically game. The
Yeah,
whole genre is a one game.
yeah. Basically, it is a pretty concentrated subgenre for sure.
And when you're looking at the growth of different genres and the decline, are you seeing geographical differences here? Like what is happening perhaps in the U.S. compared to Korea and Japan?
Yeah, I didn't dive in deep enough to look at the genres for each region, but yeah, we actually do see a decent amount of growth in a lot of these key regions. U.S. 3% time spent increase, 6% sessions increase. Japan, 7%
Wow.
time spent increase, 8% sessions
Wow.
increase. Korea, it's more flat. But another interesting market to look at was India. Actually, it's one of the biggest
Oh,
growing places. 11% time spent increase and 13% in sessions increase. So this is 2024 over 2023.
do you feel that there's some kind of a max level of engagement? Because I feel like we're spending a lot of time on phones. And when you
Yeah.
hear these numbers, like 6% year over year, 8%, they are relatively small. But at the same time, like how much more time can we spend on on devices?
Oh yeah, there's got to be a limit for sure. But at the same time, I just anecdotally, I feel like there's people are spending also a lot of time on things like entertainment, productivity. So there's always a fight for people's time, and while there's a limit for sure, I think that there's we can always try to take bigger pieces of the pie from other people as well.
Damn. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Well, there's something else that I wanted to talk about. Not something else. There's a ton of. One of the things that I've been seeing on the rise is, of course, the rise of hybrid casual, and opening up this slide here that you had in the presentation is the rise of hybrid casual. Um, what can you talk about this? Because we have been talking about hybrid casual since I think 2019, Archero, and
Yeah.
now and also talking about the death of hyper casual, and now kind of everything is finally happening. It took us only like 5 years of saying this, and and, um, and we're seeing almost like 40% growth of in-app purchase in hybrid casual games, and they feel like the future-proof model in a post IDFA because they combine this monetization of both apps and ads, high marketability, and and very wide appeal. So, what can
Sure.
you talk about the hybrid casuals rising power?
Yeah. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's the real future-proof model. The market is always
Yeah,
dynamic, and I think it still has ground to cover to really prove its place in the market. But it's pretty undeniable that I think the product model has seen a lot of growth in the past year, in the past years. One thing I would say though is, like you mentioned, it's bringing a lot of lessons from other product models. So I would say that a lot of product models are they're kind of like genres. They're becoming a bit more fluid. I would say that people are taking lessons from other places and applying it in their games. Just like puzzle games introduced metagames and narratives this year. Those 4X games are taking lessons from casual games, and hybrid casual games took lessons from all sorts of different other places. So I think product models will continue to evolve and change over time. Hybrid casual is the newest evolution, and maybe it'll face challenges, but I fully expect developers to iterate and adapt and overcome those challenges.
when you're doing this taxonomy, it feels like hybrid casual games are just becoming casual games. Like they might start with a little bit of a modest look and feel to them in terms of production values, and maybe not so many robust meta mechanics. But after a while, like when you look at games like Magic Sword or others, it's like when is there a difference between a casual puzzle game and a hybrid casual game? It's like how do you look at those?
Sure. So the way we define hybrid casual games, we say that they blend the kind of easy to understand active gameplay mechanics inherited from hyper casual games. They add in simplified long term meta features and retention strategies associated with mid core games. But maybe the easiest way to tell them apart is that they use a combination of uh, like the in-app purchase revenue and ad revenue. So we typically would say maybe 50% of each. So whenever you're seeing a decent amount of ads, rewarded ads, interstitials, whatever, it's probably going to be a hybrid casual game as opposed to a casual game. And another way that we look at it is hybrid casual games tend to have more of the generic assets, whereas casual games definitely become more polished
Yeah.
and a lot more work put into uh, more custom work put into what they put into the game for sure.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see how this evolves because we are seeing, top hybrid casual publishers, the Voodoos, the Homas, um, you you name it, over the world, finding hits that are making well above $100 million a year already in revenue, in in-app purchase revenue. And
Yeah.
so they are doubling down on those games and probably increasing production values to some extent. adding more metagame features, probably even skewing the revenue to getting 70% coming from in-app purchases. Because the longer the player is in the game, the more important it is to make that game player monetize through in-app purchases. Because
Yeah,
essentially the ads become useless. You already shown too many ads that there's
for
no
sure.
point showing ads for this one. This just doesn't bring any revenue. So I'm just always wondering when do we get to a point where hybrid casual is just the new casual?
Yeah, it's definitely not a hard line. I would say 70%. Which one is it? Is a good question actually. And I think there are games that actually have fully transitioned from being hybrid casual. They got the huge player base they were looking for that are really engaged, and it just made more sense
Yeah.
to just go full casual or full midcore actually in some cases. Uh, so I think it's interesting to have the hybrid. I think it's important to show like the growth of hybrid casual games. But also, yeah, I would definitely acknowledge the fact that these games don't necessarily stay hybrid casual their entire lives. And we actually, whenever we're looking at our taxonomy, we commonly look at games and say, "Hey, is this actually still hybrid casual?" And try to stay abreast of those trends.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're transitioning off certain games off of the hybrid casual. So
That's
you
happened, yeah.
cut the most successful ones away. So the market size of hybrid casual almost stays the same because once they reach the escape velocity, they just move to a puzzle or RPG
Yeah,
category.
yeah. We look at our definition of hybrid casual. If the game no longer fits that definition, then yeah, it makes sense to move it to a different definition that fits it.
Beautiful. And in the data, are you so kind of like skewing towards the other direction? We're talking about the CPIs, we're talking about celebrity campaigns, we're talking about Jake Paul, or I was talking about Jake Paul, but I don't know why. But do you see? I was kind of combining these two. So, do you see
Yeah,
anything with people being anti-ads? Because in the
yeah,
latest Dream, um, $50 million ad campaign, they had all these celebrities basically repeating the same USP, which is no ads.
yeah.
Is that visible somewhere in the data that people hate ads?
Yeah, yeah. This is something that I'd actually like to dive into a little bit more because there's so much data in Sensor Tower. It's
Yeah.
not easy to really dive in and see it all immediately. We have a lot of really good data, ad data as well to look at for this. What I was immediately able to find was looking at downloads for games with ad monetization are actually down the past 4 quarters over the previous 4 quarters. Although hyper casual downloads are actually, we're talking about it's kind of declining. Downloads are actually up 2%, which is interesting to see.
It's a goddamn
Uh,
cockroach.
yeah,
Just
they
refuses
just
to die.
they'll be here after the apocalypse for sure. No, this is something that I've noticed for throughout the year. We're looking at new creatives that are able to get share of voice in all the different channels. Is that no ads? It's a really common trend. You see this in a lot of different creatives, not just Dream Games, of course, is a huge example,
Wow.
but a lot of other creatives have been using this. So there's definitely a large audience of people out there who just cannot stand ads and do not want to see it. At the same time, hybrid casual has been seeing all this growth. There are a ton of games that do have ads, so it's just a matter of I think segmenting your audience appropriately and saying, these people hate ads, we can target them, and if you have a game that does have ads, you have to try to find the people that are okay with that.
Interesting. Okay. And just as usual with data, it is some kind of a dichotomy where you have two things happening at the same time. So that's totally understandable.
Yeah,
Well, switching gears and talking about emerging markets. So this is
sure.
something that has been coming up a lot. And of course, it was in your report. And as we're looking for growth, when looking as a market as a whole, quite often we're referencing to growth pockets. And one of the like two of those growth pockets have been LATAM, so Latin America and Middle East, and we're referencing to the numbers of fast in-app purchase growth in both. But when you put the actual dollar amounts and make them visible, you actually understand that despite rapid growth, like in this case, Middle East was growing almost 20% year over year, Latin America almost 15% year over year. Nevertheless, the size of that market, so in case of Middle East, we're talking about a little bit over a billion, when North
Right.
America is 28 billion and Europe is 12 billion. So it is still tiny. Like you could dominate that market and it's actually better to just be good in Western Europe.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair take. It's if you look at total sizes, as you mentioned, it's not as big for sure. But I do think they're still worth paying attention to. At some point, if this growth continues year over year over year, these are very big populations. A lot of smartphone penetration in these places. There's a big focus, especially in the Middle East, on gaming. So if this continues to happen, then one day we're going to wake up and it's not going to be so tiny, right? So I definitely think it's worth paying attention to. And even now, there can be opportunities, for if you can definitely find ROAS positive campaigns when executed effectively. So there's real potential for growth if approached strategically.
Yeah, and is there a significant difference, like when we're talking about the size of the market, where does it come from? Are those markets smaller? Like let's say in case of Middle East, is the ARPU still really high and comparable to the more advanced markets like North America and Europe, or is it population or is it spending or is it both?
Yeah, our ARPU is definitely not going to be as close to something like North America or as the tier one Asia regions for sure. But I think that also means that CPI is going to be low. There's going to be some less competition, and some of the top publishers out there have actually made major titles worked in the region. I think PUBG is pretty big in the Middle East. Game of Sultan, and there are some APAC devs that really moved into Latin quickly, like Free Fire is in Brazil. Quite
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Who have been able to actually reach pretty significant scale while being at the same time sort of kings of the third what do you call them, third world countries,
Third world countries, yeah.
or I think we're referencing them as global south or something. Like they keep changing the name, but not the three key markets, which North America, Europe, and Asia,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, absolutely. It's true if you want to reach the biggest scales, those are the big three markets are just unavoidable for sure. But we do like to point out that there are opportunities in these smaller emerging markets, and they're worth paying attention to. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and as you said, getting in there because it's cheaper, CPIs are lower, and then you can grow together with the market rather than
Absolutely.
fighting for the scraps in the existing market.
For sure, yeah. I think that when it comes to almost anything in games, building up that proficiency over time, that knowledge of the market. Scopely was working on IP games for years, and they were making IP games with Hasbro for years before they created Monopoly Go. Another example that comes to mind is Love and Deep Space, which was created by Paper Games. They created these games for Asian women for years, and then they came out with this one that now it's I think over like half of their revenue. It's a huge hit for them. So building up this proficiency and this specialization over time, if you think that these emerging markets are interesting and maybe they're going to be huge in the future, getting in now might be a good idea.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
Yeah, makes total sense. Well, let's talk about the genres, like which one are succeeding. So
Sure.
I'm just going to show. I think this one is correct. So this one is United States. And it is, I believe this is revenue. So strategy, puzzle, and casino are bringing in the cash.
Yeah.
What are we seeing in terms of the evolution of the market in West, United States being sort of a representative, 60% of the Western market,
Yes.
tier one market? What have been seeing in terms of how the revenue is being divided in app purchase revenue amongst top genres on mobile?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, the casino puzzle definitely still on top. So casino, we're seeing games like Monopoly Go, Coin Master are
Yeah,
doing
coin
well
looters are
there
really big.
for sure. Puzzle, the ever present Royal Match and Candy Crush and all those different puzzle games are doing amazing there. Actually, for growth though, I think strategy is seeing some of the most growth even in the United States. So the games that I keep mentioning, Last for Survival, Brawl Stars, Whiteout Survival, and
Yes.
then the biggest launch of the year last year, Pokemon TCG Pocket. We all we've categorized those all under strategy, and it contributed to
Hmm.
pretty significant growth in strategy in the U.S. and globally last year.
Yeah, car battlers, build and battle, and MOBA. So basically, Supercell, and then yeah, car battlers is Niantic, and then of course the Chinese 4X games.
For sure, yeah. And then Century Games for Whiteout Survival. For puzzle, we did see the biggest growers, Match Factory,
Mm-hmm.
Royal Match, Gossip Harbor. So yeah, the merge games are still doing really well. Royal Match still doing really well, and some of these more hybrid casual games like Match Factory. It's interesting. We're seeing a lot of the casual publishers actually branching out into hybrid casual and seeing a lot of success there as well.
Mm. And what happened to RPGs? Like I felt like just a few years ago, everybody was playing RPGs. Like you had the Marvel, you got the Star Wars, you got
Yeah,
Raid Shadow Legends. It was AFK journeys and so forth. It was like the genre to be in, and feels
right.
like they have been declining, right?
It does. Yeah, it's definitely something that we have seen a decline in RPGs as well as tabletop and sports. Where three genres in the U.S. That's I've been seeing decline in the past year. As for what's behind that, I don't have any specific data to back this up, but I feel like a lot of other genres have been taking what made RPGs successful and applying it in their genres and making it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, all the strategy games I just mentioned, a lot of them have these like gotcha kind of elements that really allowed RPGs to monetize so well, and they do a lot of things that RPGs haven't done yet. They're able to do like capture a younger audience by having more like bite-sized uh, engagement. You can just play these, Pokemon TCG Pocket. You can log in for 5 minutes twice a day, and that's good enough for sure. And they have all the thrill of a gotcha game while still, they have the unique advantage of their nostalgia for all the millennials, of course. But this is something that a lot of the RPGs, they want to monopolize all your time. I feel like they want to, they have so much to do in these games. Uh, so yeah, I feel like a lot of players are getting fatigued whenever they see an RPG and they think, oh, this is going to take up all my time. Why should I give them all my time?
Mm. And you mentioned the subgenres like the 4X strategies and match swaps are dominating on the revenue side,
Yeah.
but how niche should the developers think about going when they look at all the subgenres? There's plenty, and of course, Sensor Tower tool is amazing in seeing all the smallest subgenres and how they're evolving. But what's your suggestion? Like, how niche should a developer look when choosing a genre? Is it better to look at something that is smaller and kind of perhaps
Yeah.
insignificant for many, or is it better to look at something that is large, like strategy, like slots, like match swap, and try to take a small piece out of that?
Yeah. It's always kind of a fine balance, right? Trying to understand your audience size and get that innovative gameplay that'll get a really niche audience who are super engaged and will spend a lot of time and money in your game. Uh, the problem is, of course, the more niche you go, the smaller the audience. But I think in the post IDFA world, it's kind of difficult to find niche audiences. There are ways you can get creative, but uh, what I would say is I think it's you can try to target a niche, try to target this audience with a high LTV, but make steps to sure that your audience is broad enough for you to find them and get them in the game. So all these games that I constantly talk about.
Yeah.
Last for Survival, it's a 4X strategy game, which is traditionally it's hard to get people involved in these games because there's so much going on in them. There's 10 different systems and progressions and all these things to keep track of. But they get people in the game with these more arcade style ads. They have a really really slick 2E like task system that lets people know exactly what they're supposed to do when. So being able to take these steps, things like IP, to get people into the game and get that reach, can allow people to find that balance between niche and audience size.
Mm. And is it so that, I mean, on the other hand, when you think about it, the more competitive a genre you choose, the larger genre you choose, the bigger the LTVs will be. So the more you have to actually focus on monetization and live ops and innovating on your marketability to bring down the CPI. So it's kind of like it's it's tough in order to enter a big market that is growing like match like strategy. You have to have quite the operational model to even take a small piece, and at the same time,
Absolutely.
if you don't do that, then you're relegated to a niche genre where yes, the entry might be easier. You might be able to establish a certain type of position, but even being a notable player in that niche genre is still a very small not always very small. It's still a limited amount of revenue.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. I think these high LTV players, they're harder to find, they're more expensive to acquire. They're going to have high standards for they want to commit all their time and money. So developing games for them is going to be expensive as well. So yeah, it's definitely true. I think targeting and keeping these players is a high rollers game, and spending money, is no guarantee that you're going to get them either. It's
Yeah.
definitely a challenge, and I don't have any easy answers for that for sure.
Yeah, and I think it just plays out with the whole. I mean, you were helping us to get the data for the annual predictions, and part of them is something that I like to look at is the new games being launched since
Yeah,
2012 every year. And again, we're just hitting new record lows. Like the amount of new games is lower than it was in 2012, which is when Sensor Tower started pulling the data, and basically we got the
right.
first free to play games in. So it feels like there's less and less games coming out because it's just so challenging to establish a foothold in a mature market. So you just can't launch that many games.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many amazing games out there, and if you want to stand out and take a place, you have to be really high quality as well. It's
Yeah,
difficult to it's a risk as well, right? Even if you create something that you think is great, the market might disagree.
yeah, it could be a better product, but well, actually, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because if somebody has been in the market for years, they just have such an extensive amount of content and such a audience base that nobody will leave to play your game that might be better production value or more interesting theme, but essentially the same experience. Like you're launching a new shooter. Okay, what do you have? Okay, it's like the same game but less, significantly less content, and I kind of have to start from the beginning, and I don't have
Yeah,
my social graph here, so that everything plays together, and so we end up in a place where we have older and older games, but then again these games have almost infinite amount of content because of the live op investments that have been the companies have been doing.
for sure. Yeah, I think I don't know. I go on and open Candy Crush, and it looks a little bit dated to me, but
Hmm.
it's still doing amazing. These players clearly love this game. They love this experience, and they just keep going back, right?
Yeah, switching costs are really high, and so because of that, you have to be innovative, both on marketing and game
Absolutely.
design.
Yeah.
Huh. Fascinating. Well, another thing that is growing when looking at the market is, of course, the Gen Z audience. So we had Tobias from Google, and he talked about the Gen Z audience, and he talked about that this year actually Gen Z audience will be the largest spending audience on mobile. Can you talk a
Wow.
little bit about designing for Gen Z because you had this interesting graph
Yeah,
in your report?
for sure. Yeah, it's whenever we're talking about Gen Z, I think it's interesting, good to take some lessons from even outside of gaming, maybe from TikTok, that app you guys might have heard of. One thing I think people have learned from TikTok, of course, is that making things snackable, making just the small time investment for players is going to make it more palatable for Gen Z for sure. So make it snackable, something that will continually capture their attention, something new and interesting. Another thing that I think that Gen Z players enjoy is social elements. So making it social with things like PvP, co-op, guilds, being able to message each other and help each other. If all your players or if all your friends are playing this game with you, I think you're much more likely to retain in Gen Z or actually any generation, honestly. The last thing that really comes to mind is kind of a modern style, hitting a tone that resonates with Gen Z. Uh, they're for better or for worse not looking to play solitaire on their Windows 98. They have younger tastes, in terms of art, music, dialogue, tone, and hitting those tastes. I think is a good way to attract these players.
What's a typical Gen Z taste? Because it feels like all the companies, when you say Gen Z, they're like, okay, so you want a purple-haired girl with with a cyber tone. Like, is that what we're going for?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, there's some of that for sure. Uh, I don't know. I'm a little bit hesitant to, to try to put on my opinion.
Okay.
I'm actually in the generation above Gen Z, so I'm afraid
Hmm.
of showing my knowledge on Gen Z. But yeah,
Okay.
I don't know much about specifics, but just in general, yeah, trying to target them is in this way.
Yeah. I'm just curious because like I get immediately like this is not for me, but then I get so many of these games that look exactly the same. And it's like,
Yeah,
okay, now she has a pink hair, now she has a like they and kind of like the 80s vibe, but then again with a little bit of a cyberpunk, and everything just looks so generic. It's almost like they ask AI, like, hey, can you make this character Gen Z?
Wouldn't
It's
be
like, say no more. Half shaven head, purple hair on the side. Web stores. You've seen what good looks like, but have you seen great? AppCharge is the direct-to-consumer platform backed by the likes of Supercell and built by monetization pros from Moon Active, Playtika, Huge Games, and others. People who know the difference. AppCharge powers over $500 million in transaction a year for top studios, optimizing every detail. Deeply personalized web store offers custom-made design, industry-leading monetization features, in-game payments, SDK, and more. 70% of top grossing games already have a web store, but the ones scaling fastest, they're doing it with AppCharge. Learn more at appcharge.com. Little gun here, big shoes. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
I'm like, do they even like this? Okay, well, that's
Totally.
interesting.
Yeah.
Another targeting that you had in the presentation was for for gender targeting
Yeah.
here. So here I have it, and then gender target development, yes or no. This is an interesting. So you have gender breakdown by genre, and you have age breakdown by genre.
Yeah. So we're looking at this. Sorry, I need to make this a little bit bigger on my screen.
Yeah, no worries.
We're seeing, in the United States, no surprise, puzzle lifestyle, lots of women playing those games. On the other side of the board, sports, strategy, a lot more male dominated. Interestingly, some of the top strategy games that grew in the past year are a little bit more well balanced than what this chart would suggest. So it's whether when we're talking about whether you should target a single gender or not. The sad answer is that it's complicated and it kind of depends, because there are definitely games out there that are really focused on a single gender. Brawl Stars is for the past quarter in the US, it's about 88% men. So Brawl Stars is all about getting male people in their game and
boys.
Boys, yeah. Yeah. Last War is like 77% males. On the other side, Love and Deep Space, the interactive story game for women, is 84% women. But then there are also games that are a little bit more well balanced. I was surprised to see Royal Match is 64% women, which is it's balanced there, but it's there's actually a decent amount of men playing this game too.
Yeah.
Whiteout Survival, it's 54% men, it's 46% women. So
really, that much in a 4X game?
Yeah, it really surprised me as well, actually, especially compared to Last War. Last War, I would think they would be quite similar, but yeah, I didn't have a chance to dig into this more deeply. But I think it's really interesting that even in the same genre, you can find games that are able to target both or genres or a single genre or gender.
Yeah, this is interesting because like the moment when you say genre targeting, gender targeting development, I'm thinking about games like what's there was a Space Ape game that was
Chrome Valley
made
Customs.
Chrome Valley Customs, and the whole hypothesis was really clear. We're going to make a puzzle game. Everybody loves puzzle, and like mostly puzzle 60-40, and then we're going to make it for dudes because it's going to be all about fixing cars. And I believe Hutch made a similar type of game. It was Forza. It was also kind of like puzzle game with cars, something like that. I think it was with Forza IP, and both I believe tanked.
Yeah,
I had this, and again, it's just like because you see the market as a whole, I see like individual games. So I'm like, I don't know if that's the best way to go to find. But you're saying like, no, actually, it is. Like there have been cases like Whiteout Survival where you're making a 4X game and half of the audience could be women.
Yeah, it's apparently it happens. It's definitely a welcome surprise for me too. The two games that you mentioned specifically, yes, I don't. It maybe didn't work out for them so well. I think Chrome Valley Customs did pretty well for a while, but it's maybe a little bit less promising at the moment. Another game that I did look at though that's kind of similar is Century Games is Truckstar.
Yes, true. And Century Games is a 4X developer.
Yes, but they actually made this Truckstar game, another male-focused puzzle game, and I think it's still doing quite well, actually. Maybe about 2 million per month since October 2024, something like that.
For a puzzle game, that's kind of like, that's
Yeah,
puzzling.
it's better than the other two.
Yeah, and for other two, like if some game is doing okay and then it kind of goes down after that, it's basically that they were trying to figure it out with CPIs and the ROAS, and they were kind of overspending. And at some point, they're like, "Guys, we can't do this anymore," and the whole game kind of deflates immediately. So that feels like it.
Yeah, that story tracks.
Huh. Yeah, but they were good games. Wow.
Yeah,
Couldn't care less about fixing cars, I'll be honest. Sounds like, again,
true.
like maybe as much as Gen Z would care about a purple hair girl, and this is how much I, as a male, care about like fixing cars. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I don't know about you, but might be a fantasy for somebody else.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not one that particularly targets me, but I guess a lot of guys
fixing cars.
fixing cars. Yeah, I just love
Yeah.
fixing trucks so much.
Yeah, I
Something
need
you
to
want to
get
do all
my.
day.
I'm a man. I need to fix trucks. Um, Here's another interesting graph that you had here: is quality over quantity in new launches, and this is kind of going through a number of new releases. And what you have here is not only the decreasing amount, though the decrease have significantly slowed down since 2020,
Right.
but we're also seeing what genres have been coming out. So 2020, 2020, like 2021 seemed to be the year of puzzle. 2024 again, more and more puzzle games.
Right.
But what can you talk about the type of genres that are coming out, and how companies are thinking about new game launches?
Uh, Sorry, I don't recall having to prepare for this question.
No, no,
um,
no worries. Let
uh,
me. Yeah, we'll
I don't,
just remove this. But I can ask you about this. So the new game launches are decreasing, but there's
yeah,
success of titles like Pokemon TCG Pocket that shows that there are fresh hits still possible.
sure. Yeah.
Uh, so my question is more like, what is the time a successful game these days spends in soft launch compared to what it was just a few years ago? So has the time in soft launch decreased or increased?
From what I saw, after pulling it, it looks like it's been increasing actually. I think developers are really trying to make sure that their games are ready to go for the most part, at least on average. Maybe not every developer, but yeah,
Supercell probably releasing just just out of pocket all the time.
yeah. But on average, looking at
Yeah.
more across the market, I think successful games that have been seeing a decent per month revenue rate is I've been seeing, they've been trying to spend more time in soft launch, trying to hit those KPIs and make sure that they're ready for the market. The average that I managed to pull for these more successful games was actually 200 days, which is higher than I expected. I think it might be skewed by some outliers there. But yeah, it's definitely been getting longer over time, from what I can see.
Hmm. And what about IPs? Is there more IPs that you're seeing already with new games coming in, or is the IP trend more around scaling games when they're already live?
No, there's definitely been a lot of IP games being launched. I think I took a look at for games launched in the past 4 quarters. 20% of the top 10 had an IP. 19% of the top 100, and only 5% of the top 1,000. So I guess that's also a factor of, if you're not one of these big bets, you're probably going to have a harder time having an innate IP in your game. But I think that there are a lot of games that are seeing IPs in their launches. There's also IP collabs that have been really popular as well. I think out of these top 10 launches, 30% of them, 3 of them had IP collabs with them already,
Oh,
which is really
wow.
interesting to see as well.
So you said 90% of the games in top 100 have an IP.
Sorry, 19, 19,
19. I was like, yeah, because
not 90.
it, I think that's Korean market where it was 90. I remember it was something like that, like 90% of out of all the new games being downloaded have an IP. And that
Mhm.
was already several years ago. And it felt like, our markets are, even though we think we're very advanced, but really it is the probably the Korean and the Japanese markets that are the most advanced in terms of mobile,
Yeah.
China as well. So it feels like we're trailing towards that direction where it's IP or bust.
Yeah, it could be. You definitely saw a lot of IP games launching in the East. There was a soul leveling game. I think there was a Jujutsu Kaisen. A lot of these like anime kind of games. I think
Yeah.
seeing a lot of success over there.
Gen Z
Even
loves anime.
yeah. I don't want to be too generalizing, but yeah, I think that's definitely fair to say. Interesting to see, even games that that have traditionally not been super, or maybe even trying to build their own IP. So like Honkai Star Rail has a big collab with Fate Stay Night, which is really interesting to see, considering that Fate is one of their biggest competitors on mobile with Fate Grand Order.
Yeah,
It's
true.
yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting to see where we're kind of trending in that direction with like the Pokemon releases this year, and all the IP collabs.
Well, last graph that I have here is about market concentration, and this is again really interesting one. This is something that I like to look at with all the graphs whenever analyzing the markets. Not only the growth or decline of downloads and revenue, but I really like to see is what's the level of concentration, because I feel like if the top two titles are taking 70% or more of the overall revenue, it's kind of almost impossible to break through. It can happen, but it's just like it means that the audience is already being taken.
Yeah,
Or
it's definitely tough to break in there, and that's a trend that I've seen over time. Is for the most part, if there's a single or a couple of games taking up a large percentage of these genres or subgenres, a lot of times it's going to actually increase over time. So I actually dove in a little bit deeper. We're looking at genres right here. I started looking at some
yes.
subgenres specifically. So Roblox is subgenre, Sandbox. For all time, their in-app purchase concentration is 80%. For the past 4 quarters, it's 89%. So it's actually increased over time. Other sandboxes haven't really been able to compete on that front. Although to be fair, Minecraft has been still sees a ton of engagement. It's just maybe the product model there that's doesn't drive as much in that purchase model
Yeah.
as the model. But for other subgenres, Clash of Clans. For the past 4 quarters, 81% market concentration, all time 70%. People have tried to come in and dethrone them for over a decade now, and it's not happening, right? But there are some interesting counter examples. Not many, but some. I think the biggest one that comes to mind is Monopoly Go. Sensor
Yes.
Tower, we
True. True.
called that a
That's a
coin
great
later.
example.
Right. Yeah. CoinMaster in 2020-22 had 83% of the market. And then in the past 4 quarters, Monopoly Go has 58%. So they're able to come in and take a lot of that market share. Interestingly, though, CoinMaster is doing just fine. It seems that Monopoly Go more expanded the subgenre than took share away from the others.
Hmm.
Um,
That's a very interesting analysis, actually. So when looking at highly concentrated market, it's not the strategy to come in and try to take audience from the existing
yeah.
players who have already kind of cemented their position, but it's more of a question: can you expand this market? Is this still a very profitable niche that could be twice as big if we just come in and bring in more accessibility, more um, relevance to it by having perhaps the right type of an IP? That's an interesting take.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting insight that
Is
maybe you can see across
is
all the other examples as well. Yeah.
is there a data point that could show you that way that this is a market that can be expanded in terms of an audience?
Whether a market can be expanded or not.
Yeah, like how does Scopely? Let's give them the benefit of the doubt because they're a
Yeah,
smart organization, and they
for
looked
sure.
at CoinMaster raking in Moon Active, just printing money, and they're like, we gotta get in, we gotta get a piece of this one, and they figure out like we found it. If we bring the world's most famous tabletop game and
Yeah.
we marry with exact same mechanics, not saying that they copied it, but definitely got inspired by them, and now they've expanded the market because they brought in a lot of new players.
Yeah. It's tough to say that there's a data point that can point to that.
Yeah.
All historical data doesn't include any innovation. Anything new you're going to do isn't included in that, right? So it's hard to say that CoinMaster was very different from all these other close to monopolies that I've mentioned just now. And I'm not going to recommend anyone go after Clash of Clans or Roblox for sure.
Many have tried with IPs.
Absolutely, yeah. It's tough to say there's a specific data point in there. I think it might become more qualitative than that of like where is the innovation? Where does the new take? Where is the audience gonna what's gonna hook them? What's the new take that's gonna drive the market expansion?
Hmm. Well, let me know if you find that data point. Don't let anybody else know.
All right, I'll
We'll
just keep
use it
looking.
in our consulting.
Absolutely.
Sam, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing insights about the just a fantastic report that you've built. When is the next report coming out on gaming?
I believe we should have another report coming out in July, if I'm remembering correctly. So yeah, look out for that. I don't want to give too much away right now, but I think it's gonna be really interesting for the market actually.
Oh, that's awesome. So come back then, and let's focus on purely the positive takeaways
Yes.
from the Summer Games report.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, hope this was at least a little bit useful to the people out there. Thanks so much for having me.
For sure. And the link to the report is, of course, in the description below. So if you want to get the full version, that's where you get it. It's interactive. You can choose by different chosen geographies and selections. So it's a amazing, well-crafted report. And Sam, I wish you happy travels to the Far East.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Enjoy your time. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks for listening to the full episode. Now, did you know that Deconstructor of Fun isn't just your favorite industry podcast? We're also a bit of a consulting powerhouse. Now, whether you're launching your next hit, scaling your live ops, or vetting your next acquisition, we've got you covered. From market research and go-to-market strategy to live operations tuning and due diligence, our team of experts works with the top names as well as the rising stars of the industry. So if you are building, publishing, or buying, don't do it alone. Do it with us. Email consulting@deconstructoroffun.com and let's build smarter together.